Thirdly, so much of religion, traditional or modern, is the locus of superstition, gullibility, cruelty, exploitation. And that goes for much of Christianity too in its history, not least the folk Christianity of Christendom. But the assumption that the human-divine encounter takes place primarily in the realm of religious experience or religious communities, this assumption is challenged fundamentally by the heart of the Christian gospel. The earliest Christian profession, what made a man or woman a Christian, was the confession, Jesus is Lord. And Jesus is Lord was never merely a statement of personal devotion. It was an announcement of a decisive event within secular human history that had universal, indeed cosmic implications. The Jesus of whom the first Christians spoke had been crucified by the Roman authorities. And in the Roman Empire, crucifixion, though widespread, was viewed with universal disgust and horror. It was the most humiliating form of execution, the death penalty reserved for rebellious slaves, insurgents against the state, people we'd call terrorists today. No Roman citizen could be crucified. Romans didn't even discuss the subject. They pretended it never existed. It was the way they preserved the Pax Romana. So crucifixion was a way of obliterating not only the victim, but also the memory of him. And that's why not a single ancient historian pays attention to crucifixion. So I cannot overemphasize the absurdity, the foolishness of the Christian proclamation. If you wanted to convert the educated and pious religious people of the empire to your cause, whatever that cause may have been, the worst thing you could ever do would be to link that cause to a recently crucified man in an obscure part of the empire. To put it mildly, that would have been a public relations disaster. And to associate God, the source of life, with this crucified criminal was to invite mockery, ridicule, sheer incomprehension. And that was indeed the experience of the early church. But if this message were true, then surely it subverts the world of religion. It claimed that if you wanted to know what God is like, what are God's purposes for the world, you had to go not to the countless religious temples and sacred groves that dotted the empire, or even to the lofty speculations of the sages and philosophers, but you had to go outside the walls of Jerusalem and gaze in your imagination on that broken, battered, tortured corpse, that is what God is like. For the Jews, a crucified Savior, this was a contradiction in terms. It expressed not God's power, but God's powerlessness. For Greeks, the idea that a God or a son of God should die as a state criminal, that human salvation should depend on that particular historical event, was not only offensive, it was sheer madness. The Roman pantheon was most hospitable. It could readily accommodate any new deity in a manner very similar to that of Hindu Vedanta. The public cult of the emperor was a way of preserving the religious pluralism of the empire. The new Christian movement would have been accorded a ready welcome if it simply took its place as another private cult amongst the myriad of cults that the empire boasted. But the early Christians refused that offer, because for them Jesus was not a deified man, like the emperors at the Senate from time to time decreed to be divine, nor was he a mythological hero like Hercules or Arjuna in the Hindu epics. His labors were real, the agony of a cross outside the walls of Jerusalem. Now, it is the madness of this word of the cross that compels us to take it seriously. And I'm a Christian today because there's something so foolish, so absurd, so counterintuitive, so topsy-turvy about the Christian message that it gets under my skin.